The Korath Empire had watched humanity for 300 years. They had counted every human ship, mapped every human colony, and studied every piece of human technology. Their conclusion was simple. Humans were weak. They were a young species with no real military power. Their colonies were soft targets, easy to conquer whenever the Empire decided to expand. Commander Vexal stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the planet called Verdana Prime on his display screen. His intelligence reports described it as a farming settlement. 12,000 humans lived there, growing wheat and vegetables in endless fields. They had no weapons. They had no warships. They had only tractors and farming equipment. "This will be easy," Vexal said to his officers. "We will take their grain stores and use their land for our own purposes. The humans will not resist." They gave the order to move his fleet toward the planet. 12 warships carrying 8,000 soldiers began their approach. It was a force large enough to conquer worlds far more powerful than a simple farming colony. What Vexal did not know was that Verdana Prime had never been just a farming colony. 7 years earlier, a woman named Grace Holloway had changed the course of human history. She was a military strategist who had spent 20 years studying alien civilizations. She understood something that most humans did not want to accept. Humanity could not win a war against any major alien power. They were too weak, too young, too far behind in technology. But Grace had found another way. She had stood before the leaders of Earth and presented her plan. "Everyone ignores farming colonies," she had told them. "No one thinks they are important. No one watches them closely. We can use that blindness to protect ourselves." Her plan was called Harvest Protocol. It was humanity's greatest secret. On Verdana Prime, workers had been digging beneath the wheat fields for 7 years. They looked like farmers on the surface. They drove tractors and harvested crops and lived in simple houses. But underground, they were building something that would shock the galaxy. The man in charge of daily operations was Daniel Burke. He was 41 years old, with rough hands from real farm work. Every morning, he walked through the wheat fields with his daughter Sophie, who was 10 years old. He taught her about farming and soil and growing things. She believed her father was just a farmer, like everyone else on the colony. But every afternoon, Daniel took an elevator 300 meters underground. There, in a massive complex, hidden from all alien sensors, he oversaw the construction of weapons that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. His chief engineer was a young woman named Lucy Tran. She was brilliant and dedicated, and she had given 7 years of her life to this project. On the day the Korath fleet appeared in their star system, she was running final tests on the targeting systems. "How soon can everything be ready?" Daniel asked her. Lucy checked her screens. 72 hours for full power. Daniel shook his head. "We might not have 72 hours. The Korath are already here." Lucy understood. She had known this day would come. They all had. "I can push it to 48 hours, maybe less." "Do it," Daniel said. "Whatever it takes." Above them, life on the surface continued as normal. Farmers worked in the fields. Children played near their homes. The colonists went about their daily routines as if nothing was wrong. But everyone knew the truth. Everyone on Verdana Prime had been told the real purpose of their colony when they arrived. They had all agreed to keep the secret. They had all agreed to play their part. Sophie Burke did not know what her father really did underground. She was too young to be told, but she could sense that something was different today. Her father seemed worried during their morning walk. He kept looking up at the sky as if expecting something to appear. "Is everything okay, Dad?" she asked. Daniel forced himself to smile. "Everything is fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about the harvest." It was not entirely a lie. A harvest was coming. Just not the kind Sophie imagined. In orbit above the planet. Commander Vexal received reports from his scouts. The human settlement looked exactly as expected. Farmhouses scattered across rolling fields. A single landing strip for civilian transport ships. No military installations. No defensive systems. Nothing that could threaten even a single Karth warship. "The humans are sending a message," his communications officer reported. "They are asking about our intentions." Vexal smiled. They always asked. They always hoped for peaceful resolution. It was one of the things that made humans so easy to conquer. They believed in negotiation. They believed in diplomacy. They did not understand that the strong simply took what they wanted from the weak. "Ignore them," Vexal ordered. "Continue approach. I want ground troops ready to deploy within 6 hours." Deep underground, Daniel Burke watched the Karth fleet on a holographic display. 12 warships. 8,000 soldiers. More than enough firepower to turn his entire colony to ash if they wanted. But the Karth wanted the land and the food production facilities. They would not destroy what they came to steal. That gave him an advantage. A small one, but enough. "All stations are reporting ready," Lucy announced. "We managed to bring everything online ahead of schedule." Daniel looked around the command center. 200 people sat at their stations, monitoring systems that had never been tested in real combat. They had run simulations thousands of times. They had practiced until every response was automatic. But this was different. This was real. "Send them a warning," Daniel said. "Give them a chance to leave." A young communications officer named Kevin Park opened a channel to the Karth fleet. Daniel took a deep breath and spoke clearly. "Karth vessels, this is Verdana Prime. You are entering restricted space. We are transmitting coordinates for a safe withdrawal path. You have 15 minutes to change course and leave this system. This is your only warning." On the Karth flagship, Commander Vexal heard the message and laughed out loud. His officers laughed with him. A farming colony was warning away the third fleet of the Karth Empire. It was absurd. It was insulting. It was almost amusing. "The humans have courage," Vexal admitted. "I will give them that. But courage means nothing without power." He ordered his fleet to continue its approach. The 15 minutes passed in silence. On the surface of Verdana Prime, the wheat swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. The sun was warm. The sky was clear. It looked like any other peaceful day on a quiet farming world. But beneath those golden fields, 347 weapons platforms were powering up. Their targeting systems were locking onto 12 Karth warships. And 12,000 humans were about to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. News traveled fast between the stars. Within days, every major civilization in the galaxy knew what had happened at Verdana Prime. The story seemed impossible. A farming colony with 12,000 people had defeated one of the most powerful military fleets in the sector. 12 warships with 8,000 soldiers had been stopped. In 11 minutes, without a single human. Casualty. The first reaction everywhere was disbelief. "This must be a lie," said High Counselor Marsha of the Velen Confederacy when she heard the reports. "Humans do not have this kind of technology. Our intelligence services have watched them for centuries. They are a primitive species." But the evidence was hard to ignore. The Karth ships had returned home, damaged but intact. 8,000 Karth soldiers told the same story. Commander Vexal himself gave testimony before the Karth Emperor, describing in detail how his entire fleet had been disabled by weapons that appeared from nowhere. "We detected nothing," Vexal reported. "Our sensors showed only farmland. The weapons were completely hidden underground, invisible to every scanning technology we possess." The Karth Emperor was furious. His empire had been humiliated. One of his best commanders had been defeated by farmers. He demanded that the other civilizations join him in punishing humanity for this insult, but no one wanted to help. Your fleet lost in 11 minutes. Councilor Marshall pointed out during a diplomatic meeting. You want us to send our ships into the same trap? We would have to be fools. The humans showed restraint, added Ambassador Thresh of the Makari Dominion. They could have destroyed your fleet. They chose not to. They released your soldiers. They returned your ships. These are not the actions of an aggressive enemy. The Korath Emperor argued and threatened, but he found no allies. No one wanted to fight a war against an enemy whose true power was unknown. Verdana Prime had been just one colony out of 47 human agricultural settlements. How many others might have hidden weapons? No one could say, and no one wanted to find out the hard way. On Earth, the leaders of humanity gathered to discuss what came next. Grace Holloway joined them through a video connection from her hospital bed. She was 60 years old now and very sick. The years of stress from building the Harvest Protocol had worn down her body, but her mind was still sharp. We have achieved the first goal, she said. The galaxy knows that humans are not easy targets. They will think twice before attacking us again. But they may still attack, one of the leaders replied. The Korath Emperor wants revenge. Grace nodded weakly. Yes, some will always want to destroy what they fear. But we have made them afraid to act on that desire. That is enough for now. The next step is to prove that humanity has value beyond our ability to defend ourselves. She had always planned for this moment. The weapons were only part of the Harvest Protocol. The other part was still hidden, still waiting to be revealed when the time was right. On Verdana Prime, life slowly returned to normal. The wheat fields were replanted where the weapon platforms had torn up the soil. The colonists went back to their farming routines. But everything felt different now. They were no longer hiding. The galaxy knew their secret. Daniel Burke found himself becoming famous, though he had never wanted attention. Representatives from other human colonies sent messages of congratulation. Military analysts from Earth requested detailed reports. Journalists wanted interviews that he refused to give. We did what we had to do, he told his daughter Sophie when she asked about all the attention. That does not make us heroes. It just makes us survivors. Sophie was 11 years old now and understood more than she had before the battle. She knew that her father had been keeping secrets to protect her. She knew that their quiet farming community had been built on hidden strength. She was proud of what her home had accomplished, but she also sensed her father's discomfort with the praise. Do you think they will come back? She asked. The Korath? Daniel considered this question carefully. Maybe someday. Or maybe someone else will try what they tried. The galaxy is full of species who think strength means taking from others. We cannot change that. We can only show them that we are not worth the cost of attacking. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening across the galaxy. Species that had ignored humanity for centuries were suddenly interested in talking. The Velen Confederacy sent a diplomatic team to open formal relations. The Makari Dominion proposed trade agreements. Even some Korath merchants quietly reached out, seeking business opportunities despite their emperor's anger. Humanity had been invisible before. Now everyone wanted to understand these strange creatures who built secret weapons under their farmland. Lucy Tran led a team that traveled to Velen space for the first diplomatic meetings. She was nervous about representing humanity to an older and more advanced civilization. But she discovered that the Velens were more nervous about meeting her. Your species is remarkable, Councilor Marsha told her during their first conversation. We have observed many young civilizations over the millennia. Most of them either died quickly or became aggressive empires that had to be contained. You have done something different. You built power without using it to dominate others. We find this very interesting. Lucy was not sure how to respond. We only wanted to protect ourselves. We do not want to rule anyone. And that is precisely what makes you unusual, Marcia replied. Most species who gain power immediately use it to expand their territory. You defeated the Korath and then let them go home. You could have demanded tribute or territory. You asked for nothing. We asked for peace, Lucy said. That is not nothing. The Velen counselor studied her for a long moment. No, I suppose it is not. Back on Earth, Grace Holloway received reports of these diplomatic developments from her hospital bed. She smiled as she read them. Everything was going according to her design. The galaxy was beginning to see humanity differently. Not as prey to be hunted, but as a puzzle to be understood. How long until the second phase is ready? She asked her assistant. The medical research facilities on the agricultural colonies are fully operational. We can reveal them whenever you give the order. Grace closed her eyes. She was very tired. The doctor said she might not live more than a few more months. But she had done what she set out to do. She had given humanity a chance to survive in a dangerous galaxy. Not yet, she said. Let them get used to our weapons first. When the time is right, we will show them what else we have been building. And then they will truly understand what humans can be. She never gave that order herself. 8 months after the Battle of Verdana Prime, Grace Holloway died peacefully in her sleep. But she had left detailed instructions for those who would continue her work. The second phase of the Harvest Protocol would happen when it was needed most, and that moment was coming sooner than anyone expected. The 15 minutes ended. Commander Vexal sat comfortably in his command chair, watching the farming planet grow larger on his screen. His fleet was moving into attack position. His soldiers were preparing their weapons and armor. Everything was going according to plan. Then the wheat fields opened. It happened so fast that Vexal could not process what he was seeing. Across the entire planet, in 347 different locations, the ground split apart. Metal platforms rose from beneath the soil, pushing aside crops and dirt as they emerged into the sunlight. Each platform carried weapons unlike anything the Korath had ever encountered. What is this? Vexal shouted. Scan those structures. His sensor officer was already working frantically at his console. I cannot explain it, Commander. These weapons were completely invisible to our sensors. We detected nothing underground. Nothing at all. Before Vexal could respond, the weapons fired. Beams of focused energy shot upward from the planet's surface. They moved faster than any weapon the Korath possessed. They struck with precision that seemed impossible. The first volley hit all 12 warships at exactly the same moment, targeting their engine systems with perfect accuracy. The Korath flagship shuddered violently. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Crew members were thrown from their stations as secondary explosions ripped through the engine compartments. Shields! Vexal screamed. Raise shields! We cannot, Commander. The shield generators were hit first. Another volley came. This time, the weapons targeted communication arrays and sensor systems. Then came a third volley, hitting the main weapon batteries on every ship. The humans were not trying to destroy the fleet. They were taking it apart piece by piece, disabling every system that could fight back or run away. Vexal stared at his tactical display in horror. All 12 of his warships were crippled. Their engines were dead. Their weapons were offline. Their shields were down. They could not move, could not fight, could not even call for help. His mighty fleet had been reduced to helpless, metal shells drifting in orbit. The entire attack had taken 11 minutes. Deep underground on Verdana Prime, Daniel Burke watched the same tactical display with a mixture of relief and sadness. It had worked. 7 years of preparation, and their weapons had performed exactly as designed. The Korath fleet was neutralized. All targets disabled, Lucy reported. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. No ships destroyed. Minimal casualties based on life sign readings. Daniel nodded slowly. This was what they had planned. The goal was never to kill. The goal was to demonstrate power while showing restraint. Dead enemies created hatred and demands for revenge. Defeated enemies who were treated with mercy created doubt and confusion. Open a channel to the Korath commander, Daniel said. Kevin Park worked his console. Channel open. Daniel spoke calmly. Commander of the Korath fleet, your ships have been disabled. You cannot fight, and you cannot escape. However, we do not wish to harm you further. If you cooperate, we will provide medical assistance for your wounded and supplies for your crew on the crippled flagship. Vexal heard these words and felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. He felt fear. Not the fear of death, but the fear of facing something completely unknown. Everything he understood about warfare had just been proven wrong. How is this possible? He whispered to himself. His officers had no answer. They were just as stunned as he was. The mighty Third Fleet, pride of the Korath Empire, had been defeated by a farming colony in less time than it took to eat a meal. Vex single quotes, made a decision that went against every instinct in his body. He surrendered. Human commander, he said into the communication channel. We accept your terms. We will not resist. On the surface of Verdana Prime, the news spread quickly. People emerged from underground shelters where they had waited during the brief battle. They looked up at the sky, knowing that somewhere above them, 12 enemy warships now posed no threat at all. Sophie Burke found her father as he came up from the underground complex. She had been frightened during the battle, hearing distant rumbles and feeling slight tremors in the ground. No one had told her what was happening, but she was smart enough to guess that something important had changed. Dad, what happened? She asked. Daniel knelt down to look his daughter in the eyes. He had kept so many secrets from her for so long. Now, at least one of those secrets was out. Bad people came to hurt us, he said gently. But we stopped them. We had ways to protect ourselves that nobody knew about. Sophie looked at the wheat fields around them. They looked the same as always, golden and peaceful under the afternoon sun. But she understood now that her home was more than it appeared. Are they gone? The bad people? Not yet. But they cannot hurt us anymore. And we are going to help them go back to their home. This confused Sophie. We are going to help them? But they wanted to hurt us. Daniel smiled sadly. Yes, they did. But hurting them back would not make us better people. It would just make us like them. We want to show them that there is another way. Over the next several days, human medical teams boarded the crippled Korath vessels to treat the wounded. Human engineers helped restore basic life support systems. Human ships brought food and water for the 8,000 stranded soldiers who had come to conquer and now found themselves completely dependent on the mercy of their intended victims. Commander, Vexal watched all of this with growing confusion. In his experience, defeated enemies were killed or enslaved. That was the natural order of things. The strong took from the weak. The winners punished the losers. But these humans followed different rules. When his ships were finally repaired enough to limp back to Korath space, Vexal requested a meeting with Daniel Burke. The two commanders stood together on the landing platform as the last transport prepared to depart. I do not understand you, Vexal admitted. You had the power to destroy us completely. Why did you not use it? Daniel considered his answer carefully. Because destruction is easy. Any species can learn to kill. We wanted to prove that humans can be powerful without being cruel. We wanted to show that strength and mercy can exist together. Vexal stared at him for a long moment. You are unlike any enemy I have ever faced. We do not want to be your enemy, Daniel replied. "We just want to be left in peace. If you come back with hostile intentions, we will stop you again. But we would rather be friends than enemies. The choice is yours." The Korath commander said nothing more. He boarded his transport and watched through the window as Verdana Prime grew smaller and smaller behind him. He had come to conquer a weak farming colony. He was leaving with questions that would haunt him for the rest of his life. On the planet below, the weapons platforms slowly lowered back beneath the wheat fields. The ground closed over them. Within hours, there was no sign that anything unusual had ever happened. Verdana Prime looked exactly like it had before, a peaceful farming community on a quiet world. But the galaxy would never see it that way again. 1 year after the Battle of Verdana Prime, the Korath Emperor had not given up his dreams of revenge. He had spent 12 months building alliances, making promises, and spreading fear about humanity's hidden weapons. Finally, he believed he had gathered enough support to act representatives from 14 spacefaring civilizations met at a neutral space station called Axis Point. The Emperor had called this meeting to form a military coalition against humanity. His argument was simple. The humans had deceived everyone. They had hidden weapons of terrible power beneath innocent-looking farms. If they could do this once, they could do it again. The only safe response was to destroy humanity before they became too powerful to stop. "Think of what they might be hiding right now," the Emperor told the assembled diplomats. "They fooled us all for years. What else are they building in secret? We must strike first, before it is too late." Some of the species in the room nodded in agreement. Fear was a powerful motivator. The unknown capabilities of humanity worried many of them. Perhaps the Emperor was right. Perhaps destroying the humans now was the safest choice. But then High Counselor Marcia of the Velen Confederacy spoke. "You want us to attack a species that defeated your fleet in 11 minutes, she said calmly. "You lost 12 warships without causing any damage at all. And now you ask us to send our ships to the same fate?" The Emperor's face twisted with anger. "Together we would be too strong for them to resist. They cannot defeat all of us at once, can they not?" Marcia replied. "You thought one fleet was enough. You were wrong. How do you know that 5 fleets would be enough, or 10? We have no idea how many hidden bases the humans have. We have no idea what weapons they possess. You are asking us to gamble our civilizations on your injured pride." Ambassador Thresh of the Makari Dominion added his voice. "The humans have done nothing aggressive since defending themselves. They released your soldiers. They returned your ships. They have open, peaceful trade relations with several species. If we attack them now, we become the aggressors. We become the threat to galactic peace." The Emperor slammed his fist on the table. "They humiliated the Korath Empire. This cannot go unpunished." "Then punish them yourself," Thresh said simply. "The Dominion will not join a war of vengeance against a species that has shown us only peace." One by one, the other representatives made their positions clear. Some were sympathetic to the Emperor's fear, but none were willing to risk their own fleets. The memory of those 11 minutes was too fresh. The image of 12 warships rendered helpless by a farming colony was too powerful. The coalition the Emperor had worked so hard to build collapsed before it could even form. News of the failed summit reached Verdana Prime within days. Daniel Burke read the reports with relief. He had feared this moment for a year. A unified attack by multiple civilizations would have been much harder to stop than a single Korath fleet. But humanity's reputation had protected them. The galaxy was too afraid of their unknown capabilities to take the risk. "They are leaving us alone," Lucy Tran observed when they discussed the news. "At least for now. Daniel nodded. Fear is keeping us safe. But fear can fade over time. We need to give them something other than fear. What do you mean? Right now, the galaxy sees us as dangerous. That is useful, but it is not enough. We need them to see us as valuable. We need to give them reasons to want us around, not just reasons to be afraid of attacking us. This was exactly what Grace Holloway had planned. The second phase of the Harvest Protocol was not about weapons. It was about proving humanity's worth to the galaxy in other ways. Sophie Burke was 14 years old now, and she had begun to study medicine. She spent hours in the underground facilities that had been converted from weapons development to medical research. The same engineers who had built orbital defense platforms were now working on treatments for diseases that affected multiple species. Why are we doing this? She asked her father one evening. Why are we helping aliens when they wanted to hurt us? Daniel sat down with his daughter. She was growing up fast, asking harder questions every year. She deserved honest answers. Because being powerful is not enough, he explained. Anyone can be powerful. Anyone can make weapons and threaten others. But that is not who we want to be. We want to show the galaxy that humans can create things, not just destroy them. We want to prove that having us as friends is better than having us as enemies. Sophie thought about this. So we help them, and then they help us? Maybe. Or maybe they just stop seeing us as a threat and start seeing us as partners. Either way, we become part of something bigger than ourselves. That is what Grace Holloway wanted when she started all of this. Sophie had heard stories about Grace Holloway, the woman who had designed the Harvest Protocol. She had died before Sophie was old enough to meet her, but her vision shaped everything about life on Verdana Prime. Do you think her plan will work? Sophie asked. I do not know, Daniel admitted. But I believe it is worth trying. The alternative is spending forever hiding and waiting for the next attack. I would rather take a chance on building something good. Across the galaxy, attitudes toward humanity were slowly shifting. The initial fear was being replaced by curiosity. Trade ships began visiting human colonies more frequently. Scientists from other species requested collaboration on research projects. Cultural exchanges were proposed. The Velen Confederacy was particularly interested in human agriculture. Their own food production systems were highly advanced but also highly complex. Humans had developed simpler methods that could be adapted for planets with difficult conditions. Velen agricultural experts visited Verdana, primed to study these techniques. Thought it was strange for Daniel to walk through the wheat fields with Velen scientists who, just a few years ago, might have viewed him as a primitive creature barely worth noticing. Now they asked respectful questions and took careful notes. Your methods are impressive, one Velen scientist told him. You grow food on land that our systems would have classified as unusable. How did you develop these techniques? Necessity, Daniel replied. Humans have always had to make do with what we have. We could not afford to waste any resources, so we learned to use everything. The Velen seemed to consider this. Perhaps that is why you surprised us so completely. You look at problems differently than we do. You find solutions where we see only obstacles. Daniel smiled slightly. We just do what we have to do to survive. That is all any of us can do. By the end of the second year after the battle, humanity's position in the galaxy had changed dramatically. They were no longer ignored or dismissed. They were not exactly trusted or welcomed either. But they had earned a certain respect that came from demonstrated capability combined with demonstrated restraint. The Korath Emperor still spoke of revenge, but his threats had become hollow. No one would help him. His own advisors counseled patience. The humans were not worth the risk. On Verdana Prime, life continued peacefully. The weapons platforms remained hidden underground, maintained and ready but never used again. The wheat grew tall in the summer sun. Children played in the fields without knowing about the power that lay beneath their feet. But the real test was still coming. The galaxy did not know it yet, but a crisis was approaching that would force everyone to choose what mattered most. And humanity would have one final chance to prove what kind of species they truly wanted to be. 3 years after the Battle of Verdana Prime, a disaster struck the galaxy that no military force could stop. A deadly plague appeared on the Velen homeworld. It killed quickly and spread faster than any disease the Velens had ever seen. Their advanced medical science could not find a cure. Within weeks, millions of Velens were sick. Within months, their entire civilization was threatened. The Velen Confederacy sent desperate calls for help to every species they knew. The responses were disappointing. Most civilizations expressed sympathy, but offered little real assistance. The plague was too dangerous. The risk of contamination was too high. No one wanted to send their people into a death zone. Then the humans responded. Ships launched from Verdana Prime and 11 other human colonies. They carried not soldiers but scientists and doctors. They brought not weapons but medical equipment and supplies. The same underground facilities that had built orbital defense platforms had spent the last 3 years developing advanced medical technology. Another secret. Another surprise. Lucy Tran led the human medical team that arrived on the Velen homeworld. She was 34 years old now, and she had transformed from a weapons engineer into a leading medical researcher. This was the second phase of the Harvest Protocol that Grace Holloway had designed so many years ago. The plague is unlike anything in our records. Lucy reported back to Daniel Burke on Verdana Prime. It mutates constantly. Every time the Velens develop a treatment, the disease changes and the treatment stops working. Can you help them? Daniel asked. I do not know yet, but we are going to try everything we can. The human researchers worked around the clock. They barely slept. They pushed their equipment and their bodies to the limit. The Velen scientists watched them with amazement. These humans had come voluntarily into a plague zone to help a species that had once dismissed them as primitive and unimportant. High Counselor Marcia visited the main research facility to meet Lucy in person. The counselor looked exhausted and afraid. She had watched her people dying for months while the galaxy stood by and did nothing. Now these strange humans were the only ones who had come to help. Why are you doing this? Marcia asked. Her voice was weak with emotion. You owe us nothing. We ignored your species for centuries. We thought you were beneath our notice. Lucy looked up from her work. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but her voice was steady. Because this is who we want to be. We built weapons because we had to protect ourselves. But that was never our dream. Our dream was to be part of something larger. To help, to contribute, to prove that humans can create life, not just defend it. Even after how we treated you. Especially after that, Lucy replied. This is how we show you that you were wrong about us. Not with weapons. With this, the research was difficult and frustrating. Many approaches failed. But the human team kept trying, combining their techniques with Velen medical knowledge in ways that neither species had attempted before. Slowly, they began to make progress. 6 weeks after their arrival, Lucy's team discovered a treatment that actually worked. It did not cure the plague completely, but it stopped the worst effects and allowed the body to fight off the infection. For the first time in months, Velen patients started recovering instead of dying. When Counselor Marcia received this news, she wept openly in front of her council. The Velen Confederacy would survive. They had been saved by the species they had once considered too primitive to matter. News of humanity's role in stopping the plague spread across the galaxy. This was different from the Battle of Verdana Prime. That had been a demonstration of power. This was a demonstration of character. The humans had risked their own lives to save strangers who had never done anything for them. The Karth Emperor found that his calls for war against humanity now fell on completely deaf ears. How could anyone attack a species that had just saved an entire civilization? The humans had proven themselves to be exactly what they claimed, powerful when necessary, but preferring to help rather than harm. On Verdana Prime, Daniel Burke received updates about the relief effort while walking through the wheat fields with his daughter Sophie. She was 17 now, studying to become a doctor like Lucy Tran. The events of her childhood had shaped her desire to help people rather than fight them. Lucy says they have saved over 3 million Velans so far, Daniel told her. The plague is finally under control. Sophie smiled. Grace Holloway would be proud. She would, Daniel agreed. This is what she wanted all along. She knew that weapons could protect us, but only kindness could win us a place in the galaxy. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. The wheat was golden in the summer sun, swaying gently in the breeze. Somewhere beneath their feet, the weapons platforms waited in darkness, ready to defend the colony if needed again. But Daniel hoped they would never be needed. He hoped that humanity had finally proven enough. Do you think we are safe now? Sophie asked. It was a question she had asked before, years ago, when she was just a child. But this time, Daniel's answer was different. I think we are becoming something better than safe, he said. I think we are becoming valued. The galaxy used to ignore us. Then they feared us. Now they are starting to need us. Not because of our weapons, but because of what we can offer. Knowledge, help, friendship. Is that enough? Daniel considered this carefully. Nothing is ever truly enough. There will always be some who want to take what we have. There will always be threats and challenges. But we have shown the galaxy two things. First, that attacking us is a terrible mistake. Second, that helping us can benefit everyone. That combination might be the best protection any species can have. In the years that followed, humanity's place in the galactic community continued to grow. Trade flourished. Scientific collaborations produced breakthroughs that benefited multiple species. Cultural exchanges built understanding between civilizations that had never communicated before. The Velan Confederacy became humanity's strongest ally. They never forgot who had come to help them when no one else would. The Makari Dominion expanded their partnership agreements. Even some Korath began to question their emperor's hatred, wondering if there might be better ways to deal with humans than endless hostility. Verdana Prime remained a farming colony. The wheat fields still stretched to every horizon. Families still lived in simple houses and worked the land. Visitors from other worlds sometimes came to see the place where the legendary battle had occurred. They found nothing remarkable on the surface, just farmers going about their daily lives. But everyone knew the truth now. Beneath those peaceful fields, hidden from sight but never forgotten, the weapons platforms waited in silence, a reminder of what humans could do when threatened. And above ground, in research facilities and hospitals and schools, humans worked every day on what they would rather do: build, help, create, and heal. Grace Holloway's vision had finally come true. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through conquest or domination, but through the oldest human strategy of all, showing kindness to strangers, while keeping strength in reserve. The harvest she had planted all those years ago had finally come in, and it was more abundant than anyone had ever imagined. On quiet evenings, Daniel Burke still walked the wheat fields of Verdana Prime with his daughter. They talked about her medical studies, about the future, about the galaxy that had changed so much since her childhood. Sometimes they just walked in peaceful silence, enjoying the simple beauty of their home. The wheat swayed in the breeze. The sun set in colors of orange and gold. And somewhere out among the stars, Species that had once dismissed humanity were learning an important lesson. Never underestimate the farmers. The end.